Welcome to Alter Everything, a podcast about data science and analytics culture. I'm Megan Dibble, and today we're talking about machine learning operations, or MLOps, with Fiddler. Joining us for this episode is Krishna Gade, founder and CEO of Fiddler, and Asa Whillock, Alteryx's VP of Machine Learning. We'll discuss the state of MLOps, how the field is shifting in light of AI developments, and establishing trust with responsible AI in organizations. Let's get started. It's great to have you both here today. Could you please briefly introduce yourselves for our listeners?
Hi, Megan. Nice to be here. I'm Krishna Gade. I'm the founder CEO of Fiddler AI. We are an AI observability startup in the Bay Area, working towards the mission of building trust in AI.
And I'm Asa Whillock. So I'm the Vice President and General Manager of Machine Learning at Alteryx. Excited to be here.
Great. Yeah, I'm excited to have you both here today. One of the reasons that we're talking here today is because Alteryx has recently made a strategic investment in Fiddler. So Asa, could you share why the Alteryx and Fiddler partnership is important?
Oh, yeah, happy to. So when you stand back for a minute and look at what mission Alteryx has been on, it really strikes me, especially coming out of Inspire recently, where we have this amazing base of customers who have really adopted the Alteryx brand on the concept of upskilling their capabilities to be able to develop the analytical insights that drive their business. And they've up-leveled with Alteryx out of capabilities like Excel or tools that are more basic into being able to create their own insights, data prep and blend, et cetera. And they've continued that journey in the realm that I operate in, which, well, once you say what's happening, you want to be able to say what's happening next. But that really creates an important moment, which is to say, well, it's not enough to just create a prediction, right? To be able to use that to empower your business, to drive things forward, you need to take those amazing predictions that you create and synthesize and make them a part of how you do business every day. And as we started to discover that, every one of our customers had this question when we looked at predictive models, which was, hey, how do we put these into production? How do we operationalize these? And we knew that moment was true for analysts, but was one that was really not just true for that category, but was true for data scientists and was true for a much broader set of personas who were addressing the application of AI and ML. And we said, we need to really partner with and invest in the best of that industry of the ML observability and ML operationalization. And that led us to the investment in Fiddler, which we're excited to be a part of.
Yeah, definitely. That's great context to have. Now I'd love to hear from you, Krishna, if you could give some background on Fiddler and the company's story.
Absolutely. We started Fiddler 4.5 years ago with this mission to build trust into AI. The inspiration to start the company came from my experience working at Facebook. Before Fiddler, I spent about 10 to 15 years working in tech, mostly on data analytics and machine learning platforms. And when I was working at Facebook, we were building an ML platform for Newsfeed, which is the core product of Facebook. And we were running into issues around debuggability of models, monitoring and explainability of models. As the models became more and more complex, we had to answer questions like, why am I seeing this new story in my feed? Why is this new story trending? And to several different stakeholders, to employees within Facebook, to publishers, to end users. And so we needed to invest in debuggability and explainability tools. And I was part of the team that built this tool called Why Am I Seeing This? That showcased these human readable explanations. And so that's what really inspired me to start the company around Fiddler, because we saw that eventually as models become more and more commonplace and companies adopt models in business workflows, there will be questions around how did the model perform? Why did the model make such a prediction? And how do I trust this model from a business user perspective, from a practitioner perspective? And so that's the gap that we wanted to fill and started Fiddler. And now, 4.5 years later, we have a product in the market which fills that gap neatly around model observability and explainability. And we are very excited about this partnership with Alteryx in terms of how we could join forces together to create like a platform that not only can train and deploy machine learning models on the Alteryx platform, but Fiddler could help the analyst and data science community to observe and explain how they're performing and so that they can build trust with AI at the end of the day.
I really love the way you reflect on trust, right? So there's the product-wise fit of why these components are necessary, and that's totally true. But even more so than that, when you think about what these users really need to adopt and make the most out of machine learning, the focus on trust just super resonates with me. Because you talk about this persona who's approaching this is not necessarily the most technical tip of the spear kind of person in the machine learning world. It's someone who has more of a distance to go, and involving that trust and making them super comfortable with what's coming out of a predictive model is the critical reagent to success.
Yeah, that's great. And especially as we move into more low code machine learning options, understanding what the models are doing and that understandability piece is really big. One of the topics I wanted to talk about with you all today is machine learning operations, or MLOps. So my first question is for you both, what is the general state of MLOps at organizations, and how are people looking to MLOps to help them reconcile this generative AI moment that we're having in the industry?
Yeah, maybe I can go first. I think there's definitely a lot of interest amongst the enterprise community to adopt machine learning from the beginning, right? But the challenge has been on three things: tools, talent, and trust. So I think a lot of companies do not have the infrastructure to prepare their data, to train their models, to deploy them at scale, to monitor them, to make sure that the models are running on their data on a continuous basis can affect their business. So standing up the ML infrastructure, MLOps tools has been a big problem, and that is a big challenge that a lot of enterprises had to cross. The other one has been talent. This is still a very nascent area, as Asa was alluding to. Data sciences community is still pretty small. Fortunately, a lot of schools are educating data scientists, and what I hear is the bachelor's in data science has become the number one program, even ahead of computer science these days. So there'll be a lot more data scientists coming into the industry. So talent has been a problem, but it's getting fixed with people reskilling themselves. And the third thing is the trust thing that we talked about. Now, at the end of the day, these models are not regular software. They're not like coded up like with instructions to machines like how traditional software is made. It's actually, they're pattern detectors that learn from the data, and how they encode those patterns is a black box for human beings. And so being able to demystify that black box is a huge thing. So I think if we can solve those three things, talent, tools, and trust, we would see a huge opportunity in the enterprise. And when it comes to generative AI, it takes to another level, right? So now we got these pre-trained models behind an API, whether that's OpenAI or any other company that's serving them these days. Then the questions around trust are even bigger, because how does this large language model work? When would it hallucinate? When would it create a safe response? Yeah, this is a huge opportunity for the entire enterprise to adopt AI, but at the same time, they need to solve these infrastructure problems and trust problems to get it right.
I mean, you say it well, right? This is a really neat opportunity that we're kind of sitting at right now. I like to really imagine things in hype cycles. Like we work in machine learning, right? In AI, there's a lot of hype in this world.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of real practical reality of how this can benefit you, but the hype comes along with this too. And so you're, as a leader in this space, you're constantly looking for, hey, where's the real ROI? Where's my efficient frontier between investing in this thing that people are excited about that ultimately matures value? And I think as I took part in a business, and Krishna, you just mentioned you were a part of this at Facebook, now Meta at one point, you did a lot of these early ROIs were science projects, right? And things that were stood up and they provided enormous value to the organization, or they didn't and they started to practice. But ultimately, they weren't part of business as usual. They were business unusual, right? They were just these things that we created that had value. And then when we looked at machine learning and now further AI joining the business flow as how we do business, that there were a lot of pieces in the way. And operationalizing machine learning is a pretty broad statement. What it encompasses is, what are the necessary critical pieces for me to take analytical insights, predictive insights, and turn them into how I do business? And that's not a simple thing. I think our customers, some have figured it out and have a really good grasp of it so far. And many are really waking up to the moment of, hey, this is a really critical thing for me to get on top of. It's become more and more critical for every data leader, every analytics leader to have a really firm grasp of the mechanisms that allow them to feel really comfortable operationalizing data and models to allow AI to do work on the behalf of the business. It's a super exciting time because I feel like on that hype cycle, we're really starting to hit the full power of the productivity out of this particular arena. It's super exciting. You kind of tell I'm pretty passionate about it.
Pretty jazzed, yeah. No, it is really exciting. And well, there's obviously a lot of innovation and need for digital transformation around machine learning and MLOps. So I'm curious to know how you think organizations can leverage MLOps to really stay competitive.
Yeah, absolutely. So at the end of the day, we've been seeing this revolution starting with big data, where organizations started curating and warehousing data, and we had amazing platforms here which help users to analyze data, look into the business metrics, and it became like a habit. Right, in the last 10 years, you would say that pretty much every organization, if they are not a data-driven organization, they would probably be dead by now. Now, with models coming on board, whether they're pre-trained models or models trained on AutoML platforms like Alteryx and Co., there's a huge opportunity to take advantage of all of the data that you have accumulated over the last 10, 20 years and to make sense of it, make predictions for the future, create new kinds of applications, whether that's assessing customer lifetime value better or assessing demand planning better, or forecasting sales, marketing situations, pricing decisions, different use cases in the industry, and using models to do that, right? And so that's the big revolution that we are in. And this is where MLOps becomes so critical, because how are you going to take those models, train them really well, deploy them, manage them over a period of time to make sure that they're making the right predictions, monitor them, and put them in their business workflows. And that's the big opportunity for the enterprise right now. And there are a plethora of tools to choose from as well. There's pre-trained models on one side, there's AutoML platforms, open source modeling frameworks out there. So it's a great opportunity for every enterprise to sort of look into MLOps and take advantage of all of the data that they've accumulated over the period of time. And so that's kind of where I see like the future going.
When we talk about digital transformation and where we're going, one of the things that I tend to think about is, well, what does it really mean to embrace digital transformation? What does it mean, right? Because I've taken part of this in numerous industries, and there are threads that I think really help for those who are listening at home to understand, what does it mean to adopt machine learning and have a digital transformation? Am I doing that? Am I there yet? And usually what I stand back to evaluate are, we live at an intersection of tremendous capabilities that have come over, and how do you pick which ones to utilize? Usually what comes forward is the following, though. You are in a position where you might tackle a particular business problem, whether you're on tax and audit risk, or whether you're trying to hire candidates to run a business quickly, or you're trying to market to a particular segment and optimize the number of emails they have. There's a thread in this, which is you're managing a limited set of resources against a very big problem. But we've gotten to a moment now where, as you mentioned, like, you can deliver on patterns in data and in large subject matter areas, largely unwashed and unstructured data. You can pick out the elements that allow you to say, hey, this is the best use of those resources. This is how you can optimize your audit and risk strategy so that you make the most of the auditors you have. This is how you can speed up hiring your candidates, because you didn't necessarily see that there is structure within this particular engagement. And I don't think for those who are engaged in this, who want to pick this up and want to apply themselves digitally, that there's any lack of appetite to pick up ML or there's other arenas. I think there's two missing pieces that are generally there. We talked about, do I understand how to translate my business problem into a machine learning and AI problem? That's one. Is this just going from one to the other and understanding I can apply ML, I can apply these tools to this, and I can get myself an answer that lets me use my resources really well is key. And then within that is trust, which is, now that I get an answer, how do I know this answer is right? Has been a big part of that as well. And that's really comes back to the peanut butter and jelly that makes Fiddler and Alteryx so excited about being together on this story, is we have the combination of, yeah, you know what? I can address this problem, and I don't have to be a data scientist to do it. And I can trust in the answer that I'm getting because I have the tools that allow me to interrogate that response in a way that allows me to know it's consistent with my organization's goals. And that's a super powerful moment to be in, and gets me so excited about what these individuals are about to go through as they start to adopt these digital transformations.
Definitely. And I think the way you broke that down was really nice and encouraging too for the analysts and data scientists out there. There's so much talk of AI and what's getting automated, all of that. And there's this element of it's actually empowering us to do more with less. That's like the economic climate we're in too. How can we do more with less? And then also these two solutions like fitting together nicely to really empower people to be able to accomplish more.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. When I was talking earlier with some folks at Fiddler, they had talked about specifically with large language models, with LLMs, wanting to know about any shifts that you're seeing in approaches and priorities between the pre-production and production stages.
Yeah, absolutely. When it comes to models, there are two areas where you want to really deeply understand the model. One is while you're designing the model itself, you want to know how the data that you're using for training the model is set up, whether there are any biases in the data, is it clean, is it high quality? And then when you design the model, how is the model built? What were the features that are important for that model? And so this all comes under this model explainability, being able to understand the model while you are developing it. And then once you ship it to production, then you want to continuously monitor it so that you can have control over its failure scenarios. You can have alerting so that when it fails, you have ability to respond to it, fix any issues. Now, when it comes to large language models, the problem is this notion of explainability is a very hard problem. And the large language models are just huge, heavily parameterized, trillions of parameters. And so the setting perimeter control and interpretability around the model is a very hard problem. So what we have built is we've launched this tool called AI Auditor recently that helps you to audit a large language model just like a human would probe another human. So for example, if you have a large language model that responds to your prompts, now you have a question all the time that how do I trust this response? Is it actually accurate? Is it hallucinating? Can I put this large language model in front of my customers? What if it like produces some toxic content or unsafe content that hurts my company reputation? Or what if it just plain absolutely hallucinates and bluffs the response, right? So the AI auditor helps you test these things upfront. So you can actually run a whole bunch of prompt tests against it. And Fiddler then would produce this audit report with a robustness scorecard that gives you some confidence into how good this model is, what prompts is it working for, what prompts it's failing, and if it's failing, why is it failing. So it gives you a good amount of validation before you actually start using LLM. And so that's one thing that we launched. And then once you actually start using this large language model, let's say I'm trying to build a customer support chatbot and I'm using one of the large language models that are out there. So you can use Fiddler to continuously monitor the prompts and responses, the questions that your users are asking the chatbot, and the responses that the chatbot is giving them. So you can then monitor for variability in those questions, monitor for variable accuracy of those responses, and try to have some control in terms of how the chatbot is performing, if it's producing consistent answers or not. So that's basically the LLM offering that we have launched recently.
That's super exciting.
Which is, in my mind, super valuable.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm really excited to see it, to see Alteryx customers use it. Excited to have it as a part of our partnership because we're blessed every day to work with customers who are analysts and data scientists. But we also have great relationships with CDOs, chief data officers, and CIOs and CDAOs. And the number one thing I hear from these data professionals is they're excited to get going on this journey with LLMs and generative AI and all these capabilities. We have to make sure the answers are right. It's a job that's really predicated on like the data that's going to be surfaced to power the business is going to be governed and it's going to be correct. And how do you do that in this current moment, as we've talked about, like hallucinations are a thing. And it's amazing to see the barriers lower in terms of barriers to entry and adoption by knowledge workers and other personas around the enterprise who are frankly excited to use all these capabilities. But it has to be right. And given the capabilities that Fiddler's bringing to market in this domain and that Alteryx is bringing to market around Aiden, we love to really address the same point, which is that it's not good enough for answers just to be fast. They have to be correct. And making sure those answers are correct is exactly what those CDOs need. And it's going to be great.
Yeah, that's super exciting to think about basically like sitting down your model and grilling it with questions. How can I trust you? That's what I pictured in my head, like an interrogation.
Like a swinging lamp in a dark room over the model, and you're just going to ask it
Yeah,
questions and be like, "Where were you on the night of the 5th?"
exactly.
Sounds good.
But yeah, I think that'll be so helpful for building trust. It's a nice segue into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is responsible AI. When we talk about responsible AI implementations, how do you both see that taking shape in the industry, and how can we continue to build trust?
It is so important for us at this juncture to talk about, invest in, and take responsible AI and AI safety to the end users, right? Because AI is growing really fast. The technology is just in the last 6 to 9 months has just grown leaps and bounds. Even for me, someone like a practitioner in this space for the past 15 years, when just looking at how these large language models are performing, it's just magical, right? But at the same time, there's so many risks that come with it. The risks around how will they be used, what kind of scenarios will be used, whether organizations will test these models enough before they put in front of the customers, whether these models will make biased decisions or safe responses for end users. There's so many concerns around these things. So responsible AI is essentially a framework or a process to think about solving these problems so that you are essentially producing AI products in a trustworthy and responsible manner for your end users, for your employees, for the whole society in general. And so that's been our mission, right? And at the end of the day, what AI is essentially doing is it is basically automating a lot of those decisions that humans used to take in the past. How do we then make sure that there is a human machine trust inbuilt? Because at the end of the day, humans as a species, we rely on trust amongst each other. And that's why we form nations and countries and companies and communities, because we rely on this trust amongst each other. How do we build that trust with the machine? And how do we build that transparency? And that is the whole game that we need to solve for in the future for AI to be successful, so that it can be controlled. It can still work for us, not against us, but it can make us productive. So that's the next big challenge for humanity as a whole to solve for.
The responsible AI moment is one that I get very excited about. And my confession tucked within this is that I haven't always been a part of the machine learning diaspora, right? As many people are and have been doing this for a very long, extended period of time. I don't think everybody reflects that machine learning as a science goes back more than 50 years, right? It was one of the very original adoptions of computer technology, dating back a long, long, long way. But as a relatively more recent convert to the discipline, I've been a part of a lot of different industries which have had the amazing and blessed fortune of discovering capabilities that were truly game-changing and powerful. What they have brought to bear with that power always has been a reflection on how do we really want to use this ultimately? Because that power has transformative capabilities, for how we affect businesses, how consumers lead their daily lives. Put it to the right disposition, it has capabilities that outstrip that, go far beyond that, to have impact on areas of our life that we might not always necessarily expect. But what has always jumped to the forefront and has been a critical part of that, the very next phrase that has to get stated after the power comes forward, is how are we going to govern ourselves? And that's where the truly amazing minds get an opportunity to shine. Krishna, you mentioned governments. It's a great example of that one. Governments have been around for eons, but what constructing those that really operate for the benefit of the members really took an enormous amount of time and an enormous amount of thought. Responsible AI is at exactly the same inflection point. What a great time to be having this conversation, because everyone is both enthralled behind the capabilities of these systems, but also thinking every single moment around, hey, how do I make sure this is used in a way that is effective, that is correct, that is responsible toward the expectations that my consumers or the businesses that subscribe to me are expecting. And we've seen a lot of different leading luminary organizations come forward with the capabilities that we've talked about. But there's power in standards. There's power in conversations that span not just one enterprise, but many. I'm predicting here that what we will see off the back of this responsible AI initiative is that we see a much greater meeting of the minds, because everyone feels this moment much more so than ever before, that this is the time to really engage around, hey, these are the practices of thought, these are the guidelines, these are the capabilities that you need in order to be a responsible AI-powered organization. Nothing could be more apropos to talk about right now.
Definitely. I get excited about that topic as well. And all of those conversations. It does feel like there's an inflection point of it's not just theoretical or thought experiments or different things. I've read books with a lot of thought experiments and things like that about AI. And now it feels like we can start talking about, okay, we're seeing this play out. What are the practical implications? And interesting meeting of the minds, like you said. So, on that note, I think a nice place to close out would be with some best practices around responsible AI, moving into some practical takeaways and what you guys see as best practices in this field.
Absolutely. So, what we have found really important for companies to be on that journey is there has to be a top down initiative. So, it has to come from the top. The companies that are trying to invest in AI need to do it, which means that they need to get the data scientists, the analytics community, and the business community and the compliance community within the organizations come to the same table so that you can have conversation around how we are preparing data, how we are documenting the training data sets, how we are training our models. Do we have explainability around models? Are we testing for bias when we are training these models? And then how we are monitoring these models when they launch to production. Do we have alerts set up properly so that when things go wrong, we can react to it quickly before problems become big? So it's basically having multiple stakeholders come together, having a process around building AI, deploying AI, and making sure it's maintained and monitored properly. And so that's what we have seen is organizations that do it this way have seen the benefits of it. It's not just about the ethical side of things around AI, while that is important. Responsible AI practices help you build better AI because you're looking carefully at your training data. For example, a few years ago, the whole study from MIT was about how existing face recognition systems at the time could not identify African Americans, right? Because they were all trained on the faces of Caucasian faces. That was basically because you didn't look at your training data where it was actually representing all the demographics and whatnot. So it's just one example. So being able to assess your training data quality and being able to explain your models while they are being built and then being able to monitor them while they are performing in production is very critical. And then getting multiple stakeholders on the same table, having them influence the AI practice is very important.
Yeah, I love that point about stakeholder. And when I think about best practices, that the phraseology that's come forward from Alteryx more often is that analytics is a team sport. And what we mean by that are that those who can really guide you to useful insights, useful business practices, useful operationalizations of machine learning or data or any of the digital components we've been talking about come from the members of your organization who understand the shape of your data. And it's just so critical now when we talk about not only responsible and LLMs and applying ML, that your team members, those who understand, look, this data comes from this provenance, it works this way, we have this kind of agreement with it, we apply it to this business function. That's a cross-functional set that spans analysts and privacy leaders and data engineers and data scientists and executives. You need to leverage the combined knowledge of the organization to know that things are correct, right? And any system that allows you to feel confident about what you're doing is going to activate that set of stakeholders and their combined knowledge in a way that gets you the best of that combined result. What we have to do is we have to lower the barriers between those particular roles, the friction that is involved. Oh yeah, I have data in this silo and you have it in that silo. I use this system, that system. You got this number from a query, I got that number. Those are the areas that we as technologists get excited about just whittling down, because what you ultimately receive is this amazing practice of all the various stakeholders across the enterprise and their different views collaborating to bring the power of data to the fore. It's a compelling vision that I think we're going to get to see more and more as technological barriers that are necessary between silos of data engagements start to lower, right? And hopefully what we get to see is we get to see the power of teams come forward to enable all these practices.
Yeah, that's super cool. I think when people think of responsible AI and maybe regulations or putting governance in place, they don't necessarily think of breaking down barriers. Those might seem at odds with each other, but the collaboration and some of the points that you mentioned, I think that's really cool that it can lead to more possibilities, better business outcomes, and breaking down barriers between teams so that they can accomplish more.
Absolutely. Even in say use cases like sales and marketing, right, where maybe one can argue that maybe some of these may not apply, but bringing those other stakeholders into the mix is so valuable. One of our early customers was working with us on a sales outreach model. So they were building this model. This was a data engineering team that they was basically creating a model to assess which deal is going to be at risk from a closing perspective based on all the data that their sales team would supply. Now, they would basically usually come up with these predictions that these 10 deals look risky to close. Now, immediately the salespeople will ask, why do you think so? Why did the model think so? So by providing Fiddler's explanations, they were able to build the trust between the model and the stakeholder, in this case, the sales and marketing teams. And not only that, what they could do is now for those high stakes deals that they could actually provide an explanation so that their CEO could call up the customer and have a conversation to see, hey, what they do or have to potentially address the customer pain to potentially close the transaction. So the power of explainability, power of transparency is such that it brings these multiple stakeholders to one place and truly makes them truly collaborative. So now it's usually there's always a friction between the data analyst and data science community and the subject matter experts, whether they're sales and marketing folks or not. And so by bridging that gap, you can actually create a wonderful collaborative environment, and responsible AI or explainable AI can actually make that happen.
That's great. And I think a great note to end on. It's been wonderful talking with you both. Thank you so much for coming on our show.
Totally a pleasure. Absolutely. Lots of fun, Megan. Anytime.
Absolutely. It's wonderful to be on this podcast, and looking forward to working with Alteryx on this partnership.
I don't get to hang out with Krishna enough, so it's a fun opportunity for me too to pick his brain. So thanks, buddy.
Thank you so much, Asa.
Thanks. Thanks for listening. On the topic of AI, you may have seen Alteryx's recent announcement about Aiden, where generative AI meets trusted analytics. To learn more about this technology and other topics mentioned in this episode, head over to our show notes on community.alteryx.com/podcast. Catch you next time.